Hello. We'll take up the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner uh, for day 4 today. Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Anand Tirumanu. I'm a Google Certified Professional Cloud Architect. I have over 16 years of experience, out of which I have 3+ years of AWS experience with respect to the Cloud Practitioner Certification. I recently took it in October. And I also have 3+ years of Google Cloud experience, which gives me perspective to compare different cloud providers. Then today we'll be taking into consideration, or we'll continue going with what we finished last time. So until now we have covered cloud concepts. Last session was about security and compliance, so we're going to continue with that. As usual, don't forget to subscribe, like this video. Thank you. So with respect to security and compliance, AWS provides a suite of numerous services. We covered a few of them last week. Today we're going to cover a few more and take up some more important questions. And we'll also look at some sample questions that AWS would ask us, and then we'll go about how to handle those questions. We're also working on a sample application for a chat application. So I'll also mention how in the chat application we use all these services. And that will be much more important when we go on to the technology section. But in the security section, I haven't really touched upon it a lot because it's not as relevant from an architecture perspective. But we do use a lot of these applications when we actually build an application. That for our example, we're using a chat application. So when we build that, what kind of security services we use, we'll cover that as well. So 3 parts we'll cover. We'll cover the ones that we have not finished. So these are the ones we finished last time. So we'll cover a few more today. And for the others, I'll just quickly mention them, not in detail, but I'll just quickly mention them so that we know what it is when it comes up in the exam. And then the third part was we'll cover the piece where we have an example and we see where the security service will be used. Yeah, for today, we'll go through the cloud directory. That's the first concept we need to understand, first tool we need to understand that AWS provides. So AWS provides another service called Cloud Directory. The advantage of this is we have a lot of times where we have to store organizations charts into a database. So for this, any company that goes into business with AWS needs to provide different architectures, different security policies, different access based on what organization structure they have. And for this, a lot of companies use something called LDAP. You might have heard of Active Directory, LDAP, Active Directory, Lightweight Directory Services, and these kind of things. What this helps us store is we can store an organization structure where somebody rolls on to his manager, the manager rolls on to their manager, and so on. Amazon Cloud Directory builds upon that. So we don't have to really set up a database, set up any DynamoDB or an RDS database or a different way of storing this. Amazon Cloud Directory provides us the ability to store those things. So how do we do it? And what is the bigger advantage than LDAP? One is you can go in. It's a tool. You can use it online. You can log into your AWS, go and choose a AWS Cloud Directory, and then put in your like organization structure there. What is the advantage over LDAP is that you can create multiple hierarchies. Say for example, you might report into a different management based on the business or the line of business you go into. While based on your location you're working in, you might be working in a city where your management based on a location may be different, and those locations might roll into their state or provincial head, and that might roll into the country-wise head. Even though you might be working on a like a DevOps role, which is into a engineering or IT based business function, or you might be working on a marketing function which rolls onto a marketing business need. But because you also line up as a developer, so you might need different accesses. So you might need two different hierarchies to be stored, and you might need to roll up under two different hierarchies. So this is an advantage over LDAP. LDAP doesn't provide multiple hierarchies to be stored, while AWS Cloud Directory has that availability. And what can we do with this? We can actually use this to create access policies, and we can have the security policy look up the record on the AWS Cloud Directory and make sure anybody under marketing has all the accesses that come under the marketing group. And then if within marketing there are like regional needs for marketing, so that can be provided under the hierarchy, and that can be provided that can be used in security policy. Next one we'll talk about today is Trusted Advisor. After we implemented our solution for one of the Hackett clients, so we were monitoring what cost we're doing, like how the application is performing using CloudWatch. We were monitoring other things, but the other part of like this, what you have to do manually is that you have to go into billing and check how much you're spending, compare it with last month. It provides a report neatly, so billing does that. And for performance, we track how fast it does, and then we look at the code and make sure we can provide any alternate solutions. Security wise, we make sure we look at the CloudWatch log and see if there are any like unnecessary hits, denial of service attacks, or anything like that. But these things you can do separately. But Trusted Advisor is one tool where you go inside on a link, click, and then it throws out a dashboard. If you see there are like these 5 categories, it checks those 5 categories for cost optimization, performance, security, fault tolerance, and service limits. Say for example, security, it goes and checks all your security configurations, what kind of network access control lists you have, what kind of VPCs you've set up, what kind of WAF settings you have. So any gateway related suggestions. So all those things are checked by AWS. It provides suggestions, like best practice. It looks up the best practices and checks if you're actually following the best practices. If not, it'll throw out a red or a yellow warning that you can see there, and then you can click on that and see AWS will tell you what kind of suggestion it would provide you to actually follow the best practices that AWS has. So these are the 5 categories. Typically, questions come around. They'll give you a suggestion and ask if AWS Trusted Advisor does this, and then if it falls under one of these 5 categories, it typically would do it. If not, it wouldn't. So you can probably eliminate the answers that don't fall under cost optimization, performance, security, fault tolerance, and service limits. If it falls within that, we understand that it typically is looking up at the best practices and then advising you based on that. So typically 2 types of questions they might ask you. One is like, what does AWS Trusted Advisor do? So it might be a multiple choice question where would you find like where would you be able to get recommendations about AWS best practices versus what you're following. So that might be one of the questions, and then there may be multiple choices, and you'll have to choose AWS Trusted Advisor, or they could be given this kind of report or this kind of suggestion. Would this be part of AWS Trusted Advisor? So they'll give you like 5 options where 2 of them are like related to performance and security, the other are irrelevant. So those we can eliminate, and then we can say that Trusted Advisor would typically give something from these categories. So it has to be these. Yeah, sometimes they also blatantly ask what are the categories. Like, does it give anything related to cost optimization? So yes. Does it give anything related to something else? No. So that kind of questions could come as well. The next topic we'll cover today is another AWS service called CloudTrail. So if you have already used AWS, you might have used CloudWatch a lot, which I do on a regular basis. Like whenever I find that there is some issue, like if the customer says they couldn't get this, or some of the APIs timed out, I immediately go into CloudWatch and check it out. CloudTrail, though, this is not something I use on a regular basis. So we've not turned this on for all our clients, but what this does is it's a security monitoring tool. So it's more like a webcam that automatically analyzes any like movement that is untoward, say something that is not that should not happen. So if that happens, it alerts you. So you can set up those alerts, and then obviously it helps in operational troubleshooting. So if something happened and somebody changed the EC2 instances like limits or network, so we'll have a trail of what somebody has done and what has happened because of that. Obviously, some places we need to audit what's happening as well. Any big organization would need to audit it. So this serves as a place where you can audit as well. Essentially, it's a security monitoring tool which you can use for operational troubleshooting or for audit. That's the way I see it. So to the left, if you see, what can we do? So it delivers events to Amazon S3 and CloudWatch logs by recording the user activity and the API usage. So it mainly it sees who does something. That is it. It's from the perspective of this user logs in, does this, changes this limit, and then changes the alerts. They delete the alerts, add the alerts. So all those things, what that user does gets recorded in that fashion. And any API usage. So if this API was invoked at this time, was invoked at this time, so that also gets logged there. That events get delivered to S3 bucket and CloudWatch logs, and anything that is unusual with the CloudTrail insights, that gets immediately sent out. We can set up a rule where it sends out an email for us, or it can just be stored in CloudTrail, and we can go there and analyze it when we need. So we can do it multiple ways. That would be CloudTrail, but a lot of questions come up in the AWS exam, Certified Cloud Practitioner, about the differences between CloudWatch and CloudTrail. Essentially, they'll give you a confusing question where like whether this would be CloudWatch or CloudTrail would be the last 2 options you would like to eliminate, and you'll have to choose between those 2. The way I remember to choose between them was that like if it's based on what is done by whom, then that's a CloudTrail. If it's based on cloud monitoring, then that's CloudTrail. And anything that's CloudTrail logs are actually delayed by 15 minutes, so you can't get an immediate log entry. But CloudWatch is more about what happens with each AWS resource. So if you go into an AWS API gateway cloud resource and then check what it is, or a API AWS CloudWatch, and then choose the DynamoDB that you have. Then you can actually see that particular DynamoDB's log management. So essentially, it's more about log management about the AWS resources. It's not really cloud monitoring. So it doesn't monitor the cloud to see what's happening in, what's coming in, what's going out, what's happening, and what a user does. CloudWatch more so is logs every request, and we can like when we write our code, like we write our Python APIs using Lambda functions. So we specify what needs to be logged, and we also specify different log levels, whether it's going to be debug, which is probably going to be in a dev region or a QA region. And for prod regions, we'll have a much lower number of items going onto the log. So we can specify a log level as well. And then the CloudWatch agent sends the log data every 5 seconds. So you'll be able to see everything that happened pretty quickly in the CloudWatch job. Versus in CloudTrail, will be delayed by 15 minutes. That's good to know from an exam perspective. We'll move on to the next service, Amazon Config. So Amazon Config is something that records and evaluates the configurations of your AWS resources. Like configurations are within EC2 or within S3 buckets. We have multiple configurations that we set up. Say for instance, for a EC2 instance, we'll set up what kind of RAM we need, what kind of machine we need, what kind of memory we need. Is it linked to an EBS or EFS volume? So all those things are configurations that we set up. When we set up a EC2 instance, we set those things up. So those get recorded in Amazon Config. So whenever you create a EC2 instance, it gets updated in AWS Config. Sometimes as we go along, if you want to change it, if you want to increase the RAM in EC2 and memory in EC2, you want to increase the or you want to attach a new EFS volume. So all those things are configuration changes that you do. All those things get evaluated by AWS Config. Now they see what changed and how much it changed, and here you can have that send out a notification to you through a CloudWatch event or a SNS alert. That means you can get an email to yourself, or it can be a CloudWatch event that triggers something else. And any changes in history can be sent out to your email. You can put that in a S3 bucket for later analysis. You can do all those things. And this is needed for certain, essentially it's needed to know how the configurations are changing. But from a compliance perspective, if you're working in a healthcare domain or in a banking domain, or dealing with a lot of customer data in the European Union region, so there are a lot of regulations, that is laws that state that you specifically have to know any config changes, log them, and be able to deliver results to compliance whenever things happen, or if they ask for a report. So these need to get logged, and AWS Config helps with that. So otherwise, if this was not done, we would have to write some script to make sure any time in our config changes, we record the time it happened, who did it, and from what configuration to what configuration it changed, and note it down. So from a regulation or compliance perspective as well, this helps, but not for all. Some industries are very well regulated. Most industries are not. So if you're not from a well regulated industry, that probably does not make sense to you. But at least for those industries, this helps in keeping a log of all the configuration changes, so that in case something untoward happens, you can go back and look at the history and say, okay, this is something malicious is happening here, or they're unnecessarily doing some things. Okay. The next service, and this is important in terms of the number of questions that get asked, is AWS Shield. We'll talk about AWS Shield. The first concept you need to understand is denial of service attacks, which is like a hacker trying to hit your URL multiple times so that you're not able to your customers are actually not able to use your service. For example, in our chat application, if a hacker creates multiple devices and from there they try to use the chat application. So if there are like tens of thousands of chat applications that get triggered at the same time, they send some spam messages, send some spam replies. So what happens is the whole traffic of the network and the server capacity that we have, all those things get clogged. So when actual customers of our chat app use the chat app, they will be unable to reach the service, so they'll get an error. So that's denial of service. And distributed denial of service is where the hacker uses multiple bots from multiple IP addresses, typically from multiple regions or multiple countries as well. But sometimes it will be a range of IP addresses at the minimum. So they use number of bots or number of computers to actually spoof the IP address to be coming as though it's coming from multiple countries or multiple regions, and hit the target, and then make sure that the traffic is always clogged so that real customers cannot use it. This is distributed denial of service. What AWS Shield does is it safeguards applications within AWS from getting hit. So AWS Shield provides an always-on detection. That is, it's not turned off, and it also has inline mitigations. That is, when it notices and detects an attack, DDoS attack, then immediately it mitigates it so that it blocks the traffic from those particular IP addresses where we're getting malicious traffic. So we don't need to call AWS, engage them to actually get the benefit. So this is automatically done, and what we get automatically with whatever application we put in is AWS Shield Standard, but there's also an AWS Shield Advanced. This is a little bit higher, so level of protection. So I think that is one question they might ask you, like what are the two tiers, and they might ask about standard, advanced, and they might say a different name for advanced, like a higher level, or standard versus upgraded. So we'll have to remember the word that it has to be advanced and standard. So that might be one of the questions that come up. Okay, next, and probably the last most important list of things we're going to cover today is AWS Organizations. After this, the other security and governance tools are not going to be as much questioned. So I'll go through them very quickly. So AWS Organizations is a place where you can centrally organize multiple AWS accounts. Essentially, if you have different functions of your company, and each function has its own AWS account. Say, for example, at first your finance team built their finance system on AWS, so they created their own account. 6 months later, the IT team wanted to come in. They wanted to build IT services, so they build their own account in AWS. So now you have two accounts that your company owns, but they're completely separate in AWS. Then HR comes in later and says, okay, I want to build my HR system where we hire and build LMSs. everything needs to move to the cloud. So they're moving that to the cloud. And then the legal team builds their own AWS account as well. Now we have like 4 different AWS accounts. We are unable to know who's spending how much unless we ask 4 of the administrators what's happening and get the information from them. So to build that into one like AWS account, we use something called AWS Organizations. So AWS Organizations, what you can do is you can actually have those member accounts, the finance account, the IT account, the HR account, the legal account, roll in to the root account. So the root account gets access to all of them, and you can actually like separate them into different hierarchies. And there's something called organizational units that we build upon this. So in this case, what is happening is we build a operation unit which has similar access in both these levels. So for example, HR and legal need to access the same set of AWS resources and services. This is an example. I don't know how they're going to use HR and legal is going to use the same set of resources, but say that's how it's defined. And the finance has its own team, its own set of AWS resources. The IT team has its own completely different AWS resources. They don't really overlap. So in that scenario, we want to have a different structure. So we want to have an operation unit that covers the HR and legal, and but the finance member and the IT member directly roll into the root. So this is possible within organizations. So we can have multiple member accounts fall into the root. Also, we can have a operation unit which kind of rolls in between. The next thing about organizational management is what is the advantage of this is you can centrally manage the account, which is what I spoke about a little bit in detail in the last time. We also are able to get consolidated billing. So we get one bill, and we are also, and it spits out the bill based on how much finance spent and IT spent, but we get one bill which we can pay. And because of we get one bill, we could probably be getting advantage of bulk discounts. So if you're using more than certain limits of like compute or more than some limit of storage, we get discounts. But when you combine all the 4 member accounts together, you're obviously using much more of it. So you might be eligible for bulk discount. The hierarchical groupings help with meeting the security needs. So you can actually build security policies on them. Compliance, we can make sure they comply with the laws of the different countries. And you can set up budgets. You can set up different budgets for different member accounts and control them. And lastly, you can also control what AWS services each person can, each member account can use, what API actions each member account can do. So those like for example, finance could only have read access to a employee data, which is in HR, but you could actually provide HR with write and read access to the employee APIs. So that control can be done. And one important thing where they might ask questions about is service control policies. These are like when we last time covered IAM, and there are policies. So the question might be kind of confusing with those policies. Either they might ask you to remember the name service control policies which are applicable to organizations, whereas the IAM policies are applicable for IAM. They might word it that way or in a different way, but remember that service control policies can actually define at an organization level how you restrict the use of the AWS services. And within IAM, like we can it can be at a different level. So at a higher level, at a member account level or within the organizations, you can define how which member account would have what kind of access. And remember, like if the service account policy for finance restricts something, even if the like the lower level IAM policy provides access, that would be overridden. So the least amount of access will be provided. Okay. This is the list of the tools that we haven't covered today. Um, Sorry about that. I had some trouble with my computer. Yeah, back now. So now we'll cover the security and compliance tools that we haven't covered earlier. We'll go through a quick overview. We covered Artifact, which is really important. Certificate managers, where the SSL TLS certificates are provisioned, managed. So those anything with respect to the SSL and TLS certificates, those questions you just go on to AWS Certificate Manager. AWS Cloud Directory, we covered that. It was about the organization charts, any kind of course catalogs, any kind of hierarchy that you want to store, you can store it in Cloud Directory. The Cloud HSM, we spoke about the key management system, AWS KMS. So this is another key management, or you can create keys, store them, but certain industries require that this keys be stored in a hardware-based key storage that is provided by AWS Cloud HSM. So if you are from a healthcare industry, banking industry, and you need to store your keys um, in a hardware-based key storage, then you would not use KMS. You would rather use AWS Cloud HSM. We covered Cloud Tail. I'll go on to Amazon Cognito. So the Cognito is like helps with identity management of all apps. So any like mobile application you are trying to like get IAM access, Amazon Cognito helps you set up the users, and you can use them to identify it and like authenticate it and get the particular services that they can use based on that. We spoke about AWS config. Amazon Detective is incident response. Any kind of potential issues, we can go in and like check what happened and like what kind of like what was the things that happened uh, for the like potential security issue, right? So we can go back and check that, and we can also check if there are any potential security issues. So AWS Directory Service, if your company already has Active Directory where you store people's like all your company's employees and how they roll up and what kind of hierarchy structure they have, then AWS Directory Service can integrate with your the company's current Active Directory, and this can be used either on premise, or so people who are like not having access to the cloud, they can still get the access to this on premise, or it can just be used in the cloud. And you can also if AWS provides certain permission-based resources, like any single sign-on that you have, GPO, workspaces, you can also allow that to be carried on to AWS Directory Service. AWS Firewall Manager, this centralizes the management and deployment of firewall configurations. Any firewall configuration that you have across AWS accounts, you can all put them together. You can have one place where you can check all the firewall requirements. So if somebody is a security expert and they want to come in and audit and check whether you have the right firewall set up everywhere, this can be done using the firewall manager. AWS Guard Duty. Guard, we covered it already. IAM, we covered it in depth actually. IAM Access Analyzer. This is something they rarely ask about, but it's a tool, so AWS can ask about any of that. So what this does is it kind of like whatever IAM policies that you have set up based on the least privilege, it provides an overview of what resource a user has access to, and based on the existing policies, what they can actually access. We covered AWS Inspector. The next set of services that we want to know about is AWS IoT Device Defender. This is security management for IoT devices. Again, very rarely used unless your company has IoT devices. I have not used this, but essentially it is a defender service, security management for all those devices. So if you have like multiple IoT devices, say for instance, a shipping container has a lot of sensors, which goes out on the sea, so they're not really always connected on the internet. So those are IoT devices. Or if like a car, like a Tesla has its own IoT device where it can send out data to the cloud. So in these cases, we have IoT devices and those send information to the cloud. But like to make sure we are safeguarding those devices and any communication that comes from the devices back to the cloud, we have the service called AWS IoT Defender. AWS Macie, this is another thing I have not used, but this integrates with CloudWatch, and it also like understands the patterns of usage. So if somebody uses certain things a certain way, suddenly that changes, then AWS notices that, and based on their machine learning logic, they are like, okay, it comes out and provides a notification to us. We covered AWS Organizations, that's important, and a lot of questions will come from that. AWS Resource Manager. So this is a very easy system where you can you could share your resources, like including AWS transit gateways, subnets, license manager configurations, and Route 53 resolver rules resources. So this is when like you have multiple accounts, or you're using something with your like partner, and your business partner needs access to certain things. So you can actually build a subnet like along with your partner, not only within your AWS account, but your partner also could have access to some parts of the subnet. So that can be done. So that is AWS Resource Access Manager. AWS Secrets Manager is where we retrieve, manage, and rotate the key secrets. So this way, any access to EC2 environments, all those things can be would need key secrets. Those secrets can be managed safely in AWS Secrets Manager. AWS Security Hub is a tool where you can scan like, and you can check all your security settings across all the AWS tools that you have, like whether it's going to be a serverless tool, or it's going to be like the internet gateway, or it's going to be your EC2 instances. Everything, you can look at everything together in one place in Security Hub. Again, this may be if you're a security expert and you want to come and audit it, this is the place the auditor would go into. Single sign-on. this is related to IAM. I either uh, specified this during IAM or not, but single sign-on is where if your company already has a single sign-on, and like you can integrate that with like um, your company's AWS organization controls. So you can get them to single sign-on using that. Um, so users can still be managed centrally, and they can use their current single sign-on or AWS's single sign-on to get into uh, like whatever application they need access to. Cloud and your disaster recovery is the last thing. So this is for disaster recovery. Um, uh, for disaster recovery, you need to store your information, back up your information until certain time, so that you can recover any in case of any disaster. You lose your main system, you can you can enable it to be recovered automatically, fast, and cost effectively. I haven't used it, so that's from exam perspective. I think we just need to know what it does for this exam at least. So now that we covered all the tools that we need for security and compliance, so we will also look at our example that we were looking at last time. So we for this course, we've been talking about building a chat app where one client sends information to the server, and that needs to get sent to the next client. Or so somebody's messaging, person A is messaging person B, so it needs to get there, and the person A needs to get notified that person B received the message. And there are a few other things. It needs to support group chats. They should be able to not only send text, they should also be able to send other files. They should know whether the recipient read the message or not. Should also show what time the other person viewed their message last, or viewed this app last. So those are things that we need to functionally build. So this we are just using as an example for this exam, and this exam is not a hands-on exam, so I'm not going to go into hands-on building this, but I'm going to give you an example hierarchy that like architecture that we're going to use. This is very, very high level. Obviously, we're not listing all the tools that we're going to do. Essentially, we have an internet gateway. We have an Amazon API gateway, which the user mobile app will call, and then it calls a Lambda function, and then that helps like sort through the message, uh, do whatever it needs to do with the message, store the information that it needs to, including profile information, like other stuff on Amazon DynamoDB, um, and then react back to the respond back to the user. The Lambda function does that. Any static content like we can store on the S3 bucket, because those those files that people transfer, all those things can be stored. So this high level architecture does not talk too much about security and governance, but if you think about it, when you expose this to the cloud, you need to have a lot of tools that need to go with it. So I've just listed some of them that we would use when we actually build our app. We use a AWS Artifact. Any agreement that we have with AWS, if you remember, we have to go into AWS and go into AWS Artifact Agreements, and then sign agreements with AWS. So, for example, for chat apps, like Europe is a highly regulated country. We can't store customer information in certain ways. we can't store them longer than certain times. We have to get an approval from the customer to do it. So all those things need to be taken care of by our application that we're building. So in that scenario, we want to have those agreements signed with AWS so that those get like signed and you have those handy. Next thing is AWS Certificate Manager. Here SSL TLS certificates that we'll install so that we have secure access to the internet. So those would be installed. Those would get stored in the certificate manager. The AWS Cloud Trail would be used so that we know if any like API that gets used, that gets logged, and we know if how the APIs are used. Amazon Cognito will be used for authenticating the app and people getting inside. AWS IAM will be used for any user that's a developer who's building these apps. So anybody who needs access to Lambda, if there are like 4 developers that you have who are actually building these Lambda functions, we set up AWS in IAM, we set up their users, we set up their policies. We also set up some roles so that the APIs can actually access the Amazon DynamoDB. So those things are set up in IAM. AWS Inspector goes ahead and provides information to us about the best practices versus how our application performs, how our AWS solution is. So we'll use that as well. We'll definitely use key management service. Here we don't need a hardware-based service, so we're going to go with the AWS key management service that they provide. We could also use a third-party tool, but AWS key management service is very good, and we could rather use that. Given that we are already in the AWS ecosystem, that's easy to use. AWS Web Application Firewall is another thing we'll use because like to restrict like certain IP addresses. Say for example, we know that we are getting attacks from certain range of IP addresses. Those can be restricted using the Web Application Framework. And lastly, AWS Shield we'll use as well, so that any denial of services attacks will be automatically cut out. So the AWS Shield will automatically monitor it, and if it notices a pattern of malicious attacks from those IP addresses, it will automatically block. So those are some things we'll use along with our application. So that's a good point to start looking into what questions AWS Certified Practitioner exam would ask us. So let's look at the first question we're going to cover today. You're configuring service control policies or SCPs in AWS organizations. Which identities and resources can SCPs be applied to? So remember, SCPs are linked into AWS organizations. So this question doesn't question that. This question doesn't make us think about that, but more so it's asking within the SCPs, what identities and resources can it be applied to? So to this, I will refer to the AWS organizations portion where we're talking about how AWS organizations can bring individual member accounts together, and sometimes member accounts could roll into organization units. So if we go through that, I think anything that's related to IAM is not related to a SCP. They have different policies associated with them. It's called an IAM policy. So with that, I think it's easy to eliminate 1, 2, and 4, and the answer would be 3 and 5. That's good. Let's go through the next question about our AWS Artifact. So the AWS Artifact has 2 portions, if you remember. It has one where we can get like reports of compliance reports. The other is we can actually like manage your agreements with AWS. So if you remember that, then we read these questions, answers, then we can probably figure out what our answers to be. First one is access AWS compliance reports on demand, which seems to be where you click a link and you get a PDF of all the compliance report. For example, if you choose HIPAA, if you're a healthcare industry, then you get all the HIPAA compliance reports that AWS already has with third-party vendors, which I think seems to be one of the valid ones. So let's keep it aside. So consolidated manage AWS account with a central location. This is more of AWS Organizations. So it's talking about some other tool, not AWS Artifact. So I'm going to strike it off for now. Create users to enable people and applications to interact with AWS services and resources. This is another place where like you talk about IAM, so where you actually create users, or you create roles, policies. Those are not artifact related, so I'm going to strike that off as well. The fourth one is set permissions for accounts by configuring service control policies. So this is also another tool, and this seems like organizations, AWS Organizations, where you set up multiple member accounts and then provide them, configure service control policies for them. So it doesn't look like that as well. So the first one is review, accept, and manage agreements with AWS. So any agreement that you do with AWS gets managed here, which feels like the right answer. So it should be the 1 and 5. So let's try that. Good. We'll move on to the next one. Which statement best describes an IAM policy? So IAM policy is one where it's a JSON file, if you remember. So where we say each user has access. We spoke about this in the last video. So an IAM policy is questions related to IAM are very, very common. So but the IAM policy, when we spoke about last video, we spoke about it being a JSON file where we talk about like either having like allow or a deny rule, and the rule could be for any identity. We provide allow rule or a deny rule, and that rule would be for a particular resource. That's how it is. So let's read through the answers. An authentication process that provides an extra layer of protection for your AWS account. This is a very, very pretty regularly asked question. So the authentication process that provides an extra layer of protection for your AWS account is typically your two-layer protection or multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication, if you have used a different device to log in to your email or to your bank account, you might have needed to use multi-factor authentication where you get a text on your phone, or you use a different authentication app on your phone to get a code, and that code gets entered into the website. This is for extra layer protection. The same thing that AWS has, the same thing called multi-factor authentication, and this is not automatically enabled by AWS, but it's highly recommended by AWS. It provides an extra layer of protection for somebody logging into AWS. So this is part of IAM, but it doesn't really talk about IAM policy. The next one is document that grants or denies permission to AWS services and resources. This seems more relevant to what that JSON document that has like allows and denies, and it also talks about like an identity getting access to a service or a resource. So I think that's more relevant. Let's keep it aside. An identity that you can assume to gain temporary access to permissions. We spoke about this as well when we spoke about IAM last video. An identity that you can assume is a role, and it also gets you temporary access. So if you see that words assume and temporary access, sometimes they only have one of the words to confuse you. So if you see any of those words, it typically refers to a role. the identity that is established when you first create your account, AWS account, would be the root account, I believe. So it's none of these, it has to be 2, and that's correct. A few more questions and then we'll end this session. An employee requires temporary access to create several Amazon S3 buckets. Which option would be the best choice for this task? So if somebody needs a temporary access, as I spoke in the last slide, temporary access would trigger you to think about the IAM role. But let's read through this, because sometimes they might confuse us with certain words. But what do they need to do with it? They want to create several S3 buckets. So they want to have access to have S3 bucket creations, but they want to do it only temporarily. So because we don't really need this employee to have permanent access to it, we wouldn't actually update the policy to give them access, or we would not add them to a group which actually has access to create S3 buckets. Rather, we would allow them to like assume a role and do this action, and then after they're done with it, they will no longer use this role, and they don't need to have access to it. So with that said, we'll go through the options. AWS root account user, not at all. This is a pretty easy option to eliminate. IAM group, I don't think so, because we don't need to give the whole group access, or if a group has access, we don't want that group to like be added to this user. IAM role, which as we spoke is very related. Service control policy, those are related to AWS organizations, not related to IAM, so I'm going to eliminate that as well. So it has to be the IAM role, which is 3, and that seems right. Another IAM question. I know IAM questions are pretty common. Which best statement best describes the principle of least privilege? I think we spoke about this as well in the last video. So principle of least privilege is the one where a person who needs access to certain things is only provided access to that, and only the least amount of access that they need. And if it's only read access that they need, if they just need to be able to invoke a service, call an API, just able to read data, not able to really create S3 buckets, just able to read a S3 bucket. So depending on what level of permission they need, we need to provide the least amount of privilege that they need to do that action. That is the principle of least privilege. So let's go through the options. Adding an IAM user to at least one IAM group, which is not really either relevant or that's not needed to set up IAM user. Checking a packet's permission against the access control list. That is not related to principle of least privilege. Granting only the permissions that are needed to perform specific tasks, that sounds more like it. Then performing a denial of service attack that originates from at least one device. So this is not something in least privilege to do it. So we'll choose 3. That sounds right. Which service helps you protect against the distributed denial of service attack? So I think we know that AWS Shield can do this automatically. We spoke about AWS Guard Duty in the last video, AWS Inspector and AWS Artifact as well. So I think we spoke about those. Those are different use cases. Those don't really are not really relevant. For example, AWS Artifact, as we know, has 2 places. One where you can have agreements with AWS, or you can look at any compliance reports that they have. AWS Inspector gives you 5 categories of suggestions, but it's relevant. It checks you. Um, it checks your configurations and your um, setup along with the best practices of AWS, and then provides recommendations. Guard duty is not used as well, so it has to be AWS Shield. So I'm going to go with that. Which task can AWS Key Management Service perform? So Key Management Service is another important encryption related question that we will always get. Um, it Let me go through the options. It cannot do the multi-factor authentication. That's an important topic, but it's not relevant to KMS. It's more related to IAM and how like if we turn, it's an option where you can turn on, and if it's turned on, every user who logs in has to not only provide a password but also have to check a code from their phone or an app and provide that in before they can log in. Update the AWS account root account user and password. This is not done by AWS Key Management Service. Number 3 is create cryptographic keys, which is pretty much relevant because you can not only create, you can manage them, you can store them. All those are done in AWS Key Management Service. And the fourth option here in the question is assign permissions to users and groups, which is again IAM service, not really relevant to KMS. So I think we'll have to choose 3. All others are pretty much away from the answer. The next question has 2 answers. Which actions can you perform using Amazon CloudWatch? I use this all the time. CloudWatch is where you monitor like your DynamoDB, monitor your APIs, like look at all those logs, and then you can, whenever there's an error or a timeout, I come into CloudWatch to check if I see something that we have in the application logs that that can give me some insight into why this is happening. So with that said, I'll go into the answers. One is monitor your resources utilization and performance, which seems pretty relevant to CloudWatch. Receive real-time guidance for improving your AWS environment. This is not something AWS CloudWatch does. It is real-time, but it doesn't provide any guidance. It's more of a logging system, and it's not for improving your AWS environment. That you could probably look at the logs and figure out something is wrong, and then you could probably improve it. That it doesn't really do a guidance or anything for improving your AWS environment. So I'm going to strike off 2. Number 3, compile your infrastructure to AWS best practices in 5 categories. That is a completely different tool. AWS Inspector, not Amazon CloudWatch. So I'm going to strike that off. Number 3 is off. Number 4 is access metrics from a single dashboard. Yeah, definitely we do access metrics from a single dashboard. And number 5 is automatically detect unusual account activity. So we do detect unusual account activity by looking into the logs, but we don't do it automatically. I mean, CloudWatch is where everything gets logged. You can come in there to troubleshoot. It's pretty real time, but it has nothing to actually automatically detect, and it's not really built for unusual account activity. So that, I think they're just confusing that with another tool. So I would rather say it's 1 and 4, because if you see the CloudWatch dashboard, there's a huge dashboard that you can set up for your resources that you use. For me, like I have a dashboard with the DynamoDB utilization, the API utilization, the API gateway utilization. So those are things that you can set up from your dashboard as well. There's some notes here, like for receiving real-time recommendations, we use Trusted Advisor. And to compare your infrastructure with best practices in 5 categories, we use Trusted Advisor as well. So these two are more about Trusted Advisor. And the last one, automatically detect unusual account activity, is CloudTrail. Which service enables you to review the security of Amazon S3 buckets by checking for open access permissions? So here, if you want to review what permissions your S3 buckets have, then which service would you use? Would you use Amazon CloudWatch? This is more of a logging system. I don't think so. CloudTrail is what a user does, what changes have happened, um, and anything that API has accessed. So those are CloudTrail. So I'm not going to use. I don't think the 1 and 2 are relevant. Number 3 is Trusted Advisor, where you do get recommendations against best practices. So looking at the question, it asks you if it enables you to review your security, which it probably does automatically. So I'm not sure about that. So it could be the answer, but let's check. Let's Okay, was I wrong? Sorry. Which service enables you to review the security of your S3 buckets by checking for open access permission? Amazon CloudWatch. That doesn't seem right. So I think the answer is marked incorrectly here. So the answer should rather be AWS Trusted Advisor that provides real-time recommendations. Uh, so it checks multiple things, including security. So I think that is rather the answer. Amazon Guard Duty is a service for providing intelligent detection for your threat detection for your AWS environment resources. It continuously monitors the network activity and account behavior to provide any kind of threat detection. Okay, so that was again, I'm sorry about the answer being wrongly marked here. The answer should be marked as AWS Trusted Advisor. So anything that is logging is what CloudWatch does. So it's more about managing, like monitoring your resources that you use, like your S3 bucket, your DynamoDB, all those things can be logged and monitored in CloudWatch. Okay, we move on. Which categories are included in the AWS Trusted Advisor board? As I said earlier, sometimes they ask questions about um, like what are the categories. So we just have to remember what the categories are. I remember that fault tolerance is one of it. Elasticity probably is not. Scalability is not really addressed in that. Performance, I think, was, and reliability definitely was not. So it has to be 2 and 5. So to explain the answer a little bit more, AWS Trusted Advisor continuously inspects your AWS environment, and it does 5 categories, right? Cost optimization, performance, security, fault tolerance, and service levels. So that was today's session. Thank you so much for joining me. Tomorrow we'll go on to continue with technology. Then we'll take up a little bit more time on technology. So that will be more than 2 sessions covering technology. I believe it's going to be 4. And then we'll take up billing and pricing. And that would conclude our 2 weeks sessions to get our AWS Cloud Practitioner training. Thank you so much for joining again. Bye bye.